Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Werewolf Bar. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. My name is Brian P. Easton, the author of the autobiography of the Werewolf Hunter book series. Glad you could stop by for a while this evening. We've got a great show for you, including contributions from X and Z horror movie reviews and Dr. T. Broussard. But first comes the creature of the night. This particular creature is 1792, which is a small batch bourbon that comes to us by way of Bardstown, Kentucky, and the Barton Distillery Group, owned by our old friend Sazerac. This is about 47% alcohol. So let's see what they get up to down there in Bardstown, Kentucky, to you. This really has some spicy notes to it. Very bold on the tongue, no doubt thanks to its high rye mash bill. At 25% rye comes through loud and clear over the corn, but it still maintains the characteristics of a good bourbon as opposed to a rye. Now I'm told this 1792 has won a few gold medals in its time, and it's called 1792 after the year that Kentucky joined the United States of America as part of the Union. So keep up the good work, guys. And I want to give you an update on the Winter Fox Journal's Book 3. As I've mentioned before, I have broke ground on this novel back in January. And after what I think is a pretty intense opening act, I'm plotting my course forward very carefully. Carefully because I'm dealing with the Middle Eastern theater of World War I and a couple of different campaigns, including the Sinai, Palestine, and Syrian campaign. As opposed to the Western Front from the second book, this is a drastically different environment, physically, politically, and culturally. And there is much to know to make a convincing story. Really, it's like learning the mechanics of the Great War all over again. It's just all so different from what came before. And finding Michael Winterfox's place in all of this presents its own challenges, as you might imagine. So I'll keep you posted as we go along. But right now we are squarely in chapter 1 of that third Winterfox book. Well, it's been a few months since we've shared something with you from Miles Booth and his son, who have a channel called X and Z Horror Movie Reviews. And they give their opinions on horror movies based on the perspectives of their generations, X and Z. But tonight we've got one for you where the guys discuss 3 different vampire movies, of which I'm sure most of you have seen. I'm talking about The Lost Boys, Dusk Till Dawn, and 30 Days of Night. 3 very different takes on the vampire. And so here they are to compare and contrast these 3 very popular vampire flicks.
Happy Halloween. This is The Lost Boys bringing you your Vampire Halloween triple feature special. I'm X with your Gen X perspective.
I'm Z with your Gen Z perspective.
And tonight we have something special, and I'm not just talking about our look. We have 3 classic vampire films from the 80s, the 90s, and the early aughts, or the mid-aughts, I guess. And these are fun, amazing, great vampire movies. We're going to kick everything off with 2007's 30 Days of Night. This was a movie based on a comic series and brought to the big screen. It's an awesome concept. It has the idea that Barrow, Alaska, every year has the sun go down and stay down for 30 days. 30 days of darkness? Perfect for vampires. Oh, yeah. This movie stars Josh Hartnett, Melissa George, Ben Foster, and Danny Houston, among others. There's a long cast of people in here. It's lots of folks that you've seen, and they do a good job. We start off with the day that the sun goes down. Z, walk us through this.
So, the day the sun goes down, first of all, the protagonist is a cop, and we follow through his perspective pretty much throughout the story. And he meets this really creepy, grungy-looking guy, like not someone you'd want to hang out with on Friday night. You know what I mean? In any case, this guy's talking some schizo gibberish, and he sounds crazy, but it's saying they're coming for you, they're gonna get all y'all. It's like, okay, dude, you're doing good. Definitely didn't do a bunch of coke before that. Okay, we're doing good. So, moving on, he's talking about vampires, and of course, the cop doesn't know this. And by sundown, by the time everything is dark and very, very cold, because we're in the Arctic,
Barrow, Alaska.
Barrow, Alaska. By the time it's dark, the vampires come out, and they massacre this town.
It's glorious.
It is probably the best scene in the whole movie. The topographic view of the entire town just getting slaughtered by these vampires.
It's an awesome scene.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much where the movie begins to drag a little bit for me. After that scene, after that setup, this movie has some other elements and the pacing, on another note, that is questionable. It's, how long is this movie? 2 hours?
I didn't look. Standard 2-hour.
Standard 2-hour experience. Definitely probably didn't need to be 2 hours, in my opinion. It could have been a little less. There's some segments where I'm like, I'm really enjoying the 30 minutes of the attic scene, like we're hiding in the attic, but I would like a little bit more, a little bit more juice, a little bit more action. So that's what I've got. What else? What else about this movie? The vampires. What do we got?
So the vampires are solid. They're scary. They're vampiric-looking creatures, and they're made to be horror-oriented vampires. They're not human, basically, at all anymore. They don't speak.
Much more monstrous.
Yeah, human languages. They are definitely just blood-sucking machines. We watched this movie before the review. This was the last one that we watched before the review, and I have to say, I saw this one in the theaters back in 1912 when it came out, and it's I've seen it since then, but we rewatched it, and it's really stronger than I remembered it. The initial concept is great, that it's going to be 30 Days of Night. The kills are solid. There's a lot of blood, and you've got actors that are holding their own as far as moving the ball forward, keeping you engaged. I will say Z's perspective of once you get past that initial slaughter, now it turns into a survival story. That does drag, I have to admit. There are a lot of other things that this story could have done to avoid that, but there are too many scenes in the attic. There are too many what are we going to do scenes. And it gets a little, like, it pulls you out of the story a little bit because, they're hiding in an attic, and, the vampires that are all throughout the town, and it's not a large town, can't find them. I don't know about that. Anyhow, then we pick back up. They go for the ending where they don't have a choice what they're going to do. They got to make it to this one facility, and then I would say we're not going to spoil the ending. It's been 20 years almost. So Josh Hartnett, yeah, spoiler alert. He turns himself into a vampire so that he can fight back because they're not going to make it. And he wins by killing the leader. The rest of the vampires get freaked out, and the other townspeople start to take them out. And then it ends with the sun coming up and the main character dying because he's a vampire now. So Not the strongest ending, not the worst ending, kind of a cleanup because they got past their great concept, their initial like explosion of vampires everywhere, and then they didn't quite know how to wrap that up in movie form.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, but solid vampire movie. Vampires are good. Blood is good. It is not messing around. Nobody's thinking anything other than evil vampires in this one.
Correct. And
Okay.
just for the record, all of these movies, the three that we're reviewing today, they've all got something going for them, and I believe that they should be inspiration for new vampire movies,
Absolutely.
in my opinion, because there's a lack of vampire movies, a lack of good ones at that in today's day and age.
Yeah.
So getting a few that don't suck, that would be something.
Well, they do suck. Ah! I'll see myself out.
All right.
Moving on.
So,
we're going
moving
to
on.
jump back in time to 1996 and a little movie called From Dusk Till Dawn. Tell us about this movie.
Ooh, there's a lot to go into in this one. So it follows the protagonists. They are brothers, bank robbers, and it is George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino being the bank robber brothers. And
Say that fast.
Exactly. They've just robbed a bank and are on the run and they're being chased down and there's news like about them, breaking news, be on the lookout for these guys. So they're like, okay, we gotta go. So they're gonna cross the border to make it to Mexico. And they have to hitch a ride with a family who's going on vacation, I guess. And either way, they make it across the border and they end up in a bar that's called From Dusk Till Dawn.
That's not what the
That's
bar
not
is
the bar's
called.
name?
No.
What's the name of the bar?
The Titty Twister.
Titty Twister.
Yeah.
Oh, it's open from dusk till dawn. That's what I'm
correct.
trying to remember.
Yeah.
Right, the Titty
Yeah.
Twister. Titty Twisters. We're gonna.
Okay. Keep twisting.
Okay. So we make it across the border to Mexico, and we end up at a bar. And this bar, unbeknownst to them, the main characters, is ran by vampires. This is not very good for them. What do we have to say about the vampires and the set pieces?
So, this movie, I don't think this movie ever drags. This
you're
movie,
very engaged.
from the first scene onward, moves forward, and it turns into an escape movie, into a survival movie. Anyhow, I would say right to the point where we get to the bar, and then when the tension starts to build, because the vampires are coming, this is when everything takes off, and the set pieces are amazing. They have all sorts of different vampires. There's no one look, and they introduce the vampires, of course, with Salma Hayek coming out and doing her little dance. And
so many scenes in this movie.
so many scenes in this movie, yeah.
Never going to forget them.
And it's wild. Everyone turns into vampires, and then the vampire slaying begins. So let's back up a minute, because you mentioned George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino.
Indeed.
We also have Harvey Keitel. We got Juliette Lewis. We've got Tom Savini, Fred Williamson. The list goes on and on and on.
But strong names. Strong.
Oh,
strong
great
cast.
actors. Cheech Marin plays 3 roles. Danny Trejo is in this. Special shout out to the house band, Tito and Tarantula. They do a great job. Just nonstop vampire action and lots of vampire kills. Lots of vampires killing humans. Lots of humans killing vampires.
A lot of action.
And almost nobody makes it until dawn. Two characters. George Clooney makes it. That's a shame. His stupid Caesar haircut that they tried to make happen.
It's not
but
as bad
no,
as the broccoli top, though.
That's true.
So
that is true.
Got to give them points there, at least.
Exactly.
So.
And Juliette Lewis, who winds up stranded, but with a suitcase of cash. So there's that. All right. So, and a very, very cool and famous ending where they show an aerial shot of the bar, but they show it from the back, and it turns out that it's an ancient Aztec pyramid It's been mostly buried, but you can see the backside of it and the centuries worth of, everything from buses to wagons to everything else of all the
Mhm.
victims that they've taken. And it's a very fun ending, and a tremendously fun movie. Lots of
Worth
vampire
watching.
action, very evil vampires. Again, we're not getting any kind of good vampires in any of these three movies.
No, definitely not the friend vampire.
Yeah, no,
Definitely not your
no,
friend.
no sparkles,
No
none
sparkles.
whatsoever.
No.
No romance.
No, God. No.
No.
But on that note, this is definitely not a movie to watch with your folks on, Saturday night and you're looking for a family movie. Not the one. It's
No,
not the one.
not the one.
Not the one.
Okay, all right.
No.
Shout out to Gen Z.
I don't know.
Don't watch this with mom.
It's kind of something like you're going to bed. It's 9:30. You had a really long day. You were watching on your phone, and you're like, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that one." So definitely that kind of movie. Very fun, like you said. Vampires, very entertaining. Definitely not your friend. And once again, the idea of vampires where they go either really, really like deep or grim, like when different movies just across the board with vampires, just as a genre, they go in many different directions with, extremely grim or way too friendly. And it's like, or they're just kind of people with fangs. And it's like, come on, people. Like, what are we
These
doing with
all
vampires?
full throttle vampires.
But
they're gonna get you.
These are
You're not gonna make it.
serious vamps. And it's like, keep doing that. Keep doing that.
More movies like that.
More movies like that. My point.
Yeah, I will say that the inspiration for this triple vampire feature this year, we finally did get a good one. Sinners, you can see our review on that. Solid vampire movie. Very, very cool. Different than all of these three, but I digress because we've already reviewed that. Let's get to our third movie, The Lost Boys. We're jumping back another decade, 1987. This one's directed by Joel Schumacher. This is Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patrick, Jamie Gertz, the two Coreys, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Diane Wiest, Edward Herman, Barnard Hughes, a whole bunch of other people. Great movie.
Strong cast, once again.
Strong cast, strong story.
Very strong plot.
I think out of all of these, we both agreed this one has the best plot, kind of the best pacing.
And might I add, this is definitely like, if you're thinking about an 80s movie, this is one of like the best 80s movies.
Quintessential 80s
my
movie.
opinion. It's like
Also,
you think of the 80s, you think of this.
The best haircuts. Hands down. Yeah.
We digress.
Yeah, badly.
From the haircut.
We start off with a family, a mother and two sons, moving from somewhere to Santa Carla, California. And the guys, it's summertime. Both kids are going to start school again in the fall. And so they don't have long to kind of explore the town and find out what's going on before school starts again. So they do, and there's a beachfront theme park, which everyone knows about, this one now. Roller coasters, the famous carousel, all that good stuff. And they go and run afoul of a group of vampires. And then slowly the vampires recruit the older brother, Michael.
Join us, viewer.
And not the younger brother, Sam. But this movie never drags. This movie is very entertaining. And again, kind of has the strongest plot because the other two kind of tell you what they're about in the title. This one,
I think I know how long
you kind of
30 Days of Nights is going to be.
follow it. Yeah, exactly.
I think I know from whence we're going to start and end.
You're like 30 minutes per night. Like, what are we watching here? So we get great vampires, great vampire reveal. We get great makeup and special
makeup.
effects. Yeah, these are probably the most classic looking vampires, I would say.
More than likely, out of the three.
It's just everybody has seen this one by now. So we're not giving away the ending when we say that the vampires are defeated. Grandpa saves the day, and it really left a lot of room open for a sequel. And I don't know, like, why a sequel was never made here, but there was plenty. Well,
potential.
okay, a real sequel, not the direct-to-video things that they made.
I don't even know
So
about
yeah, oh yeah, no, there's like, you know,
Okay.
go to Walmart, look in the trash, and you'll see the Lost Boys
Okay.
sequels. Yeah.
All right. Gotcha.
Okay.
So, in any case, yes, very memorable characters, very memorable lines, scenes, vampires, all the good things.
Definitely
in
needs
this.
a sequel. we should write one and pitch one. Maybe we will. You never know.
Perhaps.
All of our spare time. Okay, so
In any case,
what were your what's Gen Z's takeaway for the Lost Boys?
so the Lost Boys, not only is it a good vampire movie, but just for my generation, we never really got to have like life in the 80s. I don't know.
That's true. You weren't
you know,
alive. In the
we
80s.
weren't alive. No, the whole point is, you know, it's just kind of strange to think of a world where you could just kind of go out and see, see what's going on in your town. It's like, I don't know.
Hang out at an amusement park by yourself after dark.
Yeah, and, kidnapping people, flying with vampires. I don't know. No, it's more of a perspective for me, at least. How life
80s.
was versus how it is now, and it's just interesting. And I mean, you can see that with any movie, but I think this one highlights the 80s probably the best. And yeah, I found everybody, including the actors, to do a fantastic job portraying each character. And I found, like you said, this movie doesn't drag. Its pacing is probably the best out of the three.
Yep.
And might I add, the ending is quite phenomenal.
Yeah,
I do love the set pieces and the way they ended it with the head vampire, and everything about it is pretty solid.
Yep.
It's all great. I'm never bored, very engaged. And that's the whole point of a good movie, right? To stay engaged, to have the suspense of disbelief.
Absolutely.
There's nothing pulling me out of this movie. So that's how I feel about The Lost Boys.
All right. So that's our Vampire Spectacular. This is X and Z wishing you a happy Halloween. And until we meet again,
good evening.
Thank you, gentlemen. I have to say all three of these films made an impact on me the first time I saw them. Starting with The Lost Boys back in the 80s, which I saw in the theater when it was released. And the biggest thing about that movie, to me, was the soundtrack. I had never heard music quite like that or heard it used quite the way that it was used in that movie. Complemented the whole urban gothic vibe and like no other soundtrack that I had heard up to that point. With Dusk Till Dawn, I get caught up in the whole Tarantino-ness of it all, with its snappy dialogue and the over-the-top kill scenes. And of course, that final scene at the end was just kind of the last twist of the knife, which I thought was just beautiful and completely unexpected. And then there's 30 Days of Night, which began as a graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken. It impressed me with the savage bloodlust of the vampires and their calculations toward their prey, as a good predators would be. And that claustrophobic darkness, which was almost a character unto itself, really set the tone for 30 Days of Night. And like I said, impressed me most with the bloodlust of vampires, like not really portrayed in the other two. So thanks a lot, guys, for letting us use their movie review tonight. Be sure to check out X and Z's YouTube channel for more videos and horror movie reviews. You'll find them in the description down below with the rest of the links. And since I mentioned the graphic novel, I reminded myself just now to let you know that the graphic novel adaptation of my first book has recently received a breath of life after being dormant for many years. If you don't recall, a good friend of mine named Doug Adams began sketching and scripting an autobiography of a werewolf hunter graphic novel probably 10 to 15 years ago or more. But for one reason or another, most of those pages stayed in their sketch form. Well, just in the last month, Doug and I have been collaborating again. And with the help of some new software, have been able to see some of these pages really come alive as far as inking and coloring. Now, this has the potential to really be a game changer for this project. And I don't want to say too much about it because I've been hopeful before. But fingers crossed, I think we might have something cooking here that has the potential to flesh out into multiple issues based on the original novel. We'll have to see how it progresses, and of course, we will keep you informed as it does. Well, Dr. T. Broussard is with us this evening, and we're always glad to have him. Dr. T brings a lot of information and wisdom to this show in areas that directly or indirectly figure into my series of novels. The Doctor's latest series of talks have involved historical werewolves, where he's discussed the Beast of Gévaudan, the infamous Peter Stube, and Thief of Livonia, to name a few. But tonight we're going to leave the ancient werewolves behind for a while, and we're going to fast forward through the centuries to 1983 to an exorcism in the state of Connecticut, the so-called South End Werewolf, who was known as Bill Ramsey. Heavily involved in this case were Ed and Lorraine Warren, who have since become well known and possibly even almost a household name now, thanks to the Conjuring franchise. It's all very interesting, and Dr. T is going to tell us all about it now in his latest installment of Werewolves Who Were. Here's Doc Talk Shop.
In the history of werewolves, one of the more interesting cases to me personally is that of Bill Ramsey. It involves two demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren, which are of great interest to me. And tonight, on Dr. Shop, as part of Basically with the Werewolf Hunter, we will be discussing the case of Bill Ramsey, the werewolf, his interaction with the Warrens, and the eventual division of them, and how once allies became enemies. So, Bill Ramsey, as a child, is reported to have had some sleepwalking events, and one night was found outside, growling and howling at the moon, and pulled a stump out of the ground and thrust it back into the ground with an inhuman level of strength. He then passed out, and the next day acted as though nothing had happened. Later in life, when he was married, he would go through cycles of rage and so forth. And would have moments of animalistic behavior, and this would eventually evolve into him feeling as though an animal were ripping out of him, or that he was becoming an animal, a wolf. Early on, he himself would never call himself a werewolf. This was something that evolved later. There came a point after some violent incidents where he was in a police hospital of sorts, and he was able to get a large portion of his body through a metal door window that the average human of his size, weight, could not get through during one of his rages. Eventually, the Warrens and Lorraine got a hold of him and convinced him that he needed an exorcism, that he was essentially a werewolf. Now, there are really three different versions of the Ed and Lorraine of demonological myth. You have Ed and Lorraine as the great demonologists, with the blessing of the Vatican and all that. You have Ed and Lorraine that were just trying to make a buck, and then you got Ed and Lorraine who were out and out frauds. And if you look at their cases, you can see the strains for each of these ideas. The ones are a mythic structure in and of themselves, having had some contact with their case files and their books and so on. I can tell you that the case files read quite differently than the novels. Some people think that the case files are the novels. The novels are not the case files. The novels are novels based or inspired by the case files. They're padded out to be interesting for a reader. The case files themselves tend to be very much like early paranormal research case files would be, different kinds of testing, testimonies gathered, evidence gathered. Now, within the lane, I'll tell you, Lorraine was a true believer in her gifts. She believed in what she received. She counted on it, invested in it, and her experiences were very real to her. Now, if you talk to some of their clients, often you'll see clients go through phases where at one point Ed and Lorraine were the saviors of the client. Later on, they become help to the client, and then usually when the client did not get the money that they assumed that they would receive from having told their stories, then the Warrens become villains toward the client. It's an interesting saga. But back to Bill Ramsey. By all accounts, Bill got together with the Warrens. They convinced them. They had an exorcism of him, of the wolf spirit. It was a demon spirit of a wolf, to be specific. It was not just the animal, but a demon spirit of a wolf. This would make it an imitation of a wolf, not a true wolf spirit, by the way. And from then on, his rages did not return. Now, looking at Bill Ramsey's history, you could simply say that he was a bit bipolar. And his way of expressing that mentally was identified as being wolf-like. You could also make the argument that his being a wolf was a way of excusing his violent tendencies and alcoholism. Fact is, at a certain point in his life, he lived a certain way that was not productive. And at a certain point, that changed. He became, to all appearances, a functional and productive person. And as with many of the Warrens' clients, early on, the Warrens were the savior of Ramsey and his family, and later they became simply a help. And after he became something of a tabloid figure, the Warrens became a villain source for Bill Ramsey. And so this is sort of the lot of being a paranormal researcher in the late 70s, early 80s. That seems to be a pattern that people went through. Now, as for the Warrens, I will say, I believe that Lorraine was sincere. I think Ed did what he could to back her up. I think he wrote the novels, much like he kept the museum, as a way to make money off of what they did. I do not think they overtly set out to exploit the people they work with. I do not think they fabricated evidence. I think at times Lorraine trusted her visions more than the actual evidence. And that is a risk that you take when you're otherly directed. Whether that direction comes from God, an angel, or whatever, you run the risk of not being coherent with reality. As for lycanthropy, I would say Bill Ramsey represents the emotive, psychological type of lycanthrope. He did not manifest any physiological changes, although the strength he often expressed in these states was far above average. It was not preternatural. It was not truly human. He was very over-adrenalized in those states, and his body reflected that. Now, if that process that he was undergoing had been allowed to continue, don't know, it might have gone beyond psychological lycanthropy into something more physical. But fortunately for him, that was never the case. It was never clear from the evidence that I read as to what the source was, whether it was family curse or whether it was something he invited, or none of the usual tracks are there. The types of behaviors that he exhibited would indicate possible past mental illness in the family that then manifested in him in a particular way. That is what I think is more likely. I like this case because it shows how evidence that would have been seen as supernatural in like the medieval period could be reinterpreted nowadays. We have different language for the same things, you know. But as a further example of that, Lorraine in her vision saw Ramsey as a wolf, overcome by the wolf spirit. You know, that doesn't mean he physically transformed. That's just how she saw him through her vision. Now, she didn't claim to see him that way with her mundane eyes, but I think some people, when they read the books and whatnot, they over dramatize. And having done paranormal research myself, I can tell you it's very different when you're in the midst of it versus when you're writing it down later with a clear head. And even more different when you're trying to relate it to other people, because there's a lot of things that go on internally, psychologically, emotionally that don't translate well. So, with that, I will say good hunting, and always mind the moon.
Wow. Excellent, excellent stuff. And right on the money. The Warrens were controversial figures a long, long time before the Conjuring franchise made their names well known. And I really appreciate the way Doc acknowledges this in terms more attached to human nature than occultic overtones. What I mean is the whole savior to helper to villain paradigm is very emblematic of how people tend to react to these things over time. My own personal thoughts on Ed and Lorraine lay very close to Doc's in that I don't believe there was ever any premeditation of or intent to defraud or to deceive their clients. Lorraine had the gift of a medium or a psychic, call it what you will. And she invested that part of herself into their work to such an extent that Ed once told an interviewer that every time she did, she lost a little bit more of herself. At the same time, and let's be honest, I don't think the woman ever met a house she didn't think was haunted. As for Ed, well, he didn't have the gift Lorraine had, but he had a knack for demonology, some connections with the Roman Catholic Church, and a bit of a showman's flair for drama. And I'm not going to hold that against him. Incidentally, there is a falsehood circulating on the internet about Ed for some time that he was the only non priest sanctioned by the Vatican to perform exorcisms, which is just fanciful thinking. Even in this case of Bill Ramsey, uh, as would be on brand for the Warrens, it was the controversial figure Bishop Robert McKenna who facilitated the exorcism. One last thing here, and Doc pointed out that Lorraine saw Ramsey as possessed by a wolf spirit. Now, not a natural wolf, like Doc said, in the way, say, Native American or other tribal cultures might think of animal spirits, totem animals, but as a counterfeit wolf, an imitation of a wolf, wolf-like, which is exactly what wolven means. And that is what we call the werewolves of my series, Wolven. Many thanks to Doc, as always, for bringing this segment to us. And incidentally, before I forget, I wanted to share a piece of a conversation that I had with Doc. So one night while I was doing research on the First World War, the Middle Eastern theater, I got a message from Doc asking me if I had meant to give Sylvester the same medicine, that is magic, as Billy Jack. Now, if you don't know who that is, and Gen X will definitely know, but for those of you born after a certain time, Billy Jack was a character played by Tom Laughlin in the late 60s and early 70s, who was an ex-Green Beret, Vietnam vet, and a master of Hapkido karate. He was also a self-appointed protector of, let's call them hippies, that's what they were, who were trying to live peaceably in their own community out west. Now, in these movies, The Born Losers, Billy Jack, The Trial of Billy Jack, and Billy Jack Goes to Washington, they tackled every conceivable issue of the 1960s, from pacifism to racism to the treatment and fate of wild horses. Billy Jack, his character was part Shoshone or Navajo, depending on which movie we're talking about. And I distinctly recalled, after Doc mentioning this to me, that Billy Jack taking part in a rattlesnake dance, a Shoshone snake dance, did indeed inspire the rattlesnake and the ceremony that Sylvester went through to become blood brothers with the rattlesnake. So yes, after Doc mentioned this, I well remembered that being a part of the influence there. But what I had also forgotten, yet had apparently stuck in my subconscious somewhere, was that in Billy Jack's medicine bag, he carried not only snake's teeth, but owl's feathers. SLJ carries the rattle of a rattlesnake and a single owl feather. But man, it was very cool remembering that, what I had accidentally forgotten. So once again, big thank you to Dr. T and a nod to Tom Laughlin's Billy Jack, One Tin Soldier Rides Away. Okay, well, I'm going to make that last call. And here's one more taste of 1792. And we're going to call her done this time around. Thanks for joining us for a while this evening. You can find us at werewolfhunter.com and send me an email at brian@werewolfhunter.com. Be sure to take a look at our links down in the description below, which will take you to our books, monster hunting adjacent madness, and all sorts of things peripheral to the autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series. We hope to see you back here in May. So be sure to like and subscribe before you leave the bar this evening. And until then, happy hunting and mind the moon.